This is one of your moments of glory, my people.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are going to give it just 1 minute and then we'll start, just to let everyone in. Thanks. Okay, it is 2 minutes past 1, and thank you everyone for joining us again on this Friday afternoon. It's a privilege for me to introduce our speaker for today, Dr. Pieter Berubert. Dr. Berubert is a senior lecturer at the University of the Free State and certainly no stranger to the industry. He's going to speak to us today about why credentialing is the most important sustainability tool. So we're really looking forward to that. But before we continue, just a reminder about a few house rules. Please add any comments or questions in the chat box and we'll get to them at the end of the session. We've disabled the mics for the participants just to ensure there's a good flow of events, but you are more than welcome to add anything in the comments section. For those who are participating in the CropLife CPD program, the assessment is available on the CPD system in category 3 of the online modules. So, okay, Dr. Berubert, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us today. Over to you.
Thank you, Alrisa. Can you see me and hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, so let's go straight on ahead with it. Welcome everybody to my presentation today, and thank you to Alrisa and the CropLife team for the opportunity to share some of my knowledge and research findings, and I'm sure that you will find it interesting. I am not here to cross swords with anybody, no individuals, societies, or regulatory bodies. First and foremost, I am a scientist and my life policy is the truth always. What I share with you today are international and personal research findings combined with my own experiences. Nothing more, nothing less. But as they say, if the shoe fits, then it's like it is. So, sorry, we have an issue with a slideshow here. Are the slides not advancing on that side?
No, they are. We can. Do you want to go to the next one? There we go. Yes, perfect.
Okay. Internationally, agriculture as a business and as a way of life has undergone profound changes in the past 50 years. The major drivers between these changes are a handful of forces: population growth, increased food demand, political stability or instability, climate change, and advances in technology, very recently and very fast. In South Africa, political transformation has played a uniquely prominent role, particularly in the deliberate shift of the public agricultural extension mandate away from commercial farmers towards small-scale and emerging farmers following the democratic transition post-94. We are not here today to debate the merits of that shift in focus. That is a separate conversation. We are here today to discuss the consequences of that shift and the very real effects it has had on the commercial farming sector, especially on the quality and integrity of the advice that reaches the commercial crop farmer. Before we go any further, consider this. We accept credentialing, the combination of qualification and accreditation, as non-negotiable in medicine, in law, in engineering and aviation. And we do not allow unlicensed pilots to carry passengers. We do not allow unregistered attorneys to represent clients in court. We do not allow unqualified surgeons to operate on patients, yet in agriculture, where the decisions made every single day affect soil health, water quality, biodiversity, food safety, and the livelihoods of hundreds of thousands of farming families, the bar for those who may call themselves an agricultural advisor is in many cases effectively zero. This is not a minor oversight. It is a systemic failure with consequences that ripple through the entire food production chain. We often encounter advice on the applications of products that will enter the soil, the water table, and potentially eventually the food chain delivered via social media platforms, WhatsApp groups. And here's the thing, often by unqualified, non-accredited individuals representing supply companies, often with no legal or professional consequence whatsoever. So this is a form of pseudoscience, and its potentially devastating impact on food production and the sustainable management of our natural resources represents one of the most serious threats that agriculture faces today. We will go into the pseudoscience concept a little bit more in detail later. I do realize, and I really do mean that when I say it, I do realize today that I am preaching to the converted, probably. The mere fact that you considered the topic important enough to attend this lecture, and secondly, the fact that you form part of the CropLife SA accredited advisor CPD program confirms this. Furthermore, you will see why the agrochemical industry, and this you will see throughout the lecture, especially towards the end, why the agrochemical industry here and globally, internationally, are in many cases the exception to the problem that we face today. In this lecture, I want to take you through a structured explanation of first how did we arrive at this situation? What the research tells us about its consequences locally and globally. What the commercial crop production sector on the eastern highveld of Mpumalanga is telling us about what farmers actually need and expect from their advisors. And I think you will find that part of the lecture very interesting for us all to take note of. My argument is straightforward. Qualification and accreditation in agriculture are not bureaucratic luxuries. They are the most important sustainability tools we have. Allow me to share as a background a bit of my personal journey with you and how I got to the point where I felt it necessary to do something about this issue, about this massive problem that we have. My engagement with this problem began in the field, out there in the field. For many years, I worked as an agronomist in the commercial farming sector, and I still do, advising producers on soil management, plant nutrition, and crop protection across the summer grain industries of South Africa. Over years, I have observed with growing concern a gradual but unmistakable deterioration in the quality and scientific integrity of the advice reaching commercial farmers. And then later, during farm visits, I often found myself spending the first hour correcting misinformation, usually sparked by either a previous visitor, a social media post, or a YouTube video. Furthermore, I sensed a growing confusion and insecurity among farmers about what was true and where reliable guidance could be found. I watched qualified agronomists being replaced in practice, if not in name, by sales representatives whose primary mandate was the movement of product units rather than the well-being of the soil or the sustainability of the farming operation. I observed field trial results conducted by a farmer and such a representative or salesperson over only a single season and then being presented at information days as if they were peer-reviewed scientific findings. I also encountered fertilizer recommendations made without a soil analysis, lime recommendations delivered without reference to a soil pH target or even the soil physical properties and chemical properties. And then chemical applications prescribed without an integrated pest management framework. And so the list can go on. And I'm sure that many of you have also experienced the same. These are not abstract concerns. Each one of these failures has a direct cost not only to the farmer's pocket, but to our most precious resource, the soil, to the water table that lies below it, and to the food security of the consumers who depend on what that soil produces. So, after that background, it was this accumulation of professional frustration from my side and a deep conviction that something needed to be done that drove me first into a postgraduate research project and ultimately into the academic study of how research-based information reaches or fails to reach the commercial farmer in South Africa. The first study was conducted among commercial maize and soybean producers on the Eastern Highveld, and a subsequent PhD study on communication between the agricultural researcher and the farmer. And both these studies confirmed what I had observed in the field, and that is that there is a widening and dangerous gap between the science that exists and the advice that reaches the producers. And did you hear that? I would like to repeat that. There is a dangerous and widening gap between the science that exists and the advice that reaches the producer. As I said before, the credentialing and accreditation of agricultural advisors is not only the most effective tool for closing that gap, it may be the only tool that will work at scale. So, to understand the current situation, one must understand what was lost. What did we have? Before 94, government agricultural extension in South Africa served the commercial farming sector extensively. Researchers at institutions such as the ARC, provincial departments, and university maintained a robust network of specialist support for commercial producers, such as soil and crop monitoring programs, field trial networks, specialist advisory services in the area under discussion today, namely soil science, plant nutrition, and crop protection. And most importantly, regular information days where objective scientific results were shared. After 94, the focus of the public extension mandate shifted, as was to be expected, towards emerging and small-scale farmers. However, the infrastructure that had supported commercial farmers was not replaced. It was simply withdrawn. Look at the numbers. The numbers are staggering. In 2015, the Department of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries, DAFF, listed only one agronomist and one soil scientist amongst 190 extension officials employed in the entire province of Mpumalanga. Why is this significant? Because Mpumalanga is a province that accounts for at least 22% of South Africa's maize production and more than 50% of its soy production. This is not an extension service. It is in practical terms the absence of one. The withdrawal of qualified public support did not happen in isolation. That I can tell you. The number of qualified and registered agronomists in South Africa declined by 20% in just 7 years. And I would guess that it could be even lower now. Meanwhile, commercial farms grew larger and fewer, meaning each remaining qualified advisor carries a larger share of the country's food and natural resource risk. And we'll get back to this point a little bit later. At the same time, the number of commercial farmers in South Africa fell from more than 100,000 in the 80s to less than 50,000 by 2020. And here's the thing about these numbers. Between 10 and 20% of the remaining farmers of this number produce more than 80% of our country's agricultural output. I am sure most of you today have also noticed how the farms that remain are on average substantially larger. It is not a uniquely South African, it is a worldwide phenomenon. Farmers, the medium and smaller farmers disappear and the farmers grow bigger and bigger and bigger. So, more land is being managed by fewer farmers with even fewer qualified advisors. So what does this mean? It means that the consequences of a single poor recommendation are correspondingly larger. That is a real problem. As I said before, you have to understand that these events are not uniquely South African. Across the developing world, the international farm advisory sector has undergone significant restructuring, mostly because of the global reduction in government investment in agricultural extension. During 2020 already, the FAO has documented this trend with concern, warning that the withdrawal of public advisory infrastructure places smallholder and commercial farmers alike in an advisory vacuum that the private sector has been neither fully willing nor fully equipped to fill. So the question is, in this advisory vacuum, who fills this vacuum? The private sector, supply companies, agri-retailers, seed suppliers, fertilizers and chemical companies stepped in a relatively short time to provide what the government no longer could. In South Africa, agricultural co-ops, who had in the past offered agronomic services to their members as part of a comprehensive product and advisory package, oftentimes inclusive of financing. Gradually, however, many co-ops and supply companies scaled back their agronomist or advisor complement, relying instead, and here is part of our problem, on product representatives to carry the advisory function forward. Most of you who sit here today know the old trusted, die mannetjie saam met die kannetjie concept. I grew up in the chemical industry with there must be a mannetjie with a kannetjie. It is still that way. It still works that way. Except nowadays, often the mannetjie with the kannetjie is not a qualified crop or soil advisor anymore. This substitution is problematic at its core. The qualified advisor serves the farmer's interest, including the long-term sustainability of the natural resources. Why is this a problem? Why is that a problem at its core? The product representative, on the other hand, mostly serves the interest of the supplying company, which is, by definition, the movement of product. And these interests are not always, these interests are not always aligned. In a controversial but brilliant cross-national study involving the Netherlands, France, and UK and Denmark, it was found that some advisors employed by supply companies were demonstrably inclined to recommend higher volumes of pesticides than were necessary, because of their trade-related commercial interest. This is a profound ethical problem, and it is one that accreditation and professional registration are specifically designed to address. But to be fair, many supply companies do employ qualified and accredited advisors, and many product representatives are personally committed to giving sound advice. I know many of them. To those of you that are here today, thank you. And as we would not have been part of a healthy agricultural sector if it was not for you. To confirm this across the disciplines of soil science, plant nutrition, and crop protection, my research found that 97% of farmers preferred to purchase from supply companies that employed accredited advisors from whom they could seek advice, suggesting that where qualified advisors are present, farmers truly value and utilize them. Something that I think industry must take note of. The concern, however, is the large proportion of advisory interactions where they are not. You know, over years in our country, not only in our country, but also internationally, we have accumulated so much information supplied by our brilliant researchers that often after a farm visit by myself or a phone call, I would just wonder, why does the farmer not know that? Why this question, or why would he doubt the obvious scientific facts? And this question of why does he not have access to the research results led me to a subsequent study where I examined the communication pathway between the agricultural researcher and the farmer, specifically in the maize, soybean, and the sugarcane industries in South Africa. And I can tell you that one of the most disturbing findings in that study was regarding field trials. Remember the question that I asked earlier, why does science not reach the farmer? The scientific field trial, properly conducted, is one of the primary, if not the primary, mechanism by which new practices, cultivars, products, and technology move from laboratory to field. And most scientists acknowledge that. It is the bridge between the researcher and the producer. And when that bridge is compromised, research knowledge stops reaching the farmer. What I found in practice was a systematic weakening of that bridge over time. Field trials that had historically been designed, monitored, and analyzed by qualified specialists working in conjunction with researchers and extension specialists were increasingly being conducted by farmers in collaboration with unqualified individuals, mostly without any involvement of a qualified agriculturalist to design the trial, to control for confounding variables, or to interpret the results. And I think that you cannot disagree with me that the outputs of these pseudo trials, sometimes referred to as plaasproewe or farm trials, were then presented at industry information days as scientific evidence, often even under the banner of participatory research, while being nothing of the sort. Once again, this is not a situation uniquely South African. More than 20 years ago, researchers documented similar trends in the United States, noting that the scientific credibility of field trial results is entirely dependent on the integrity of the methodology with which the trial is conducted. Those of you present here today who are also involved in field trials will share my frustration about irrational or undocumented interventions by the farmer on the trial plot, an accidental and additional spray application, a variation in planting date in the trial plot, All of these things are enough to nullify the results. Without the relevant specialists, such as an agronomist, to document and control these variables, this data is scientifically worthless. The well-known Professor Robert Nielsen at Purdue University was emphatic on this point. He said the involvement of a qualified agricultural specialist in the design and execution of on-farm trials is not optional. It is the minimum requirement for the results to be meaningful. The consequence, as you can see, of filling the extension and advisory vacuum with unqualified personnel is therefore not merely that farmers receive poor individual advice. No, it is that the entire scientific communication chain, from researcher through extensionist to farmer, is corrupted at its most critical junction. So, what is pseudoscience and why does it thrive? This advisory vacuum that we have been discussing up until now creates the perfect scenario for the opportunist and pseudoscience to infiltrate the advisory chain. Pseudoscience is defined as a set of claims, beliefs, or practices that are presented as scientific but fail to meet the standards of methodology and evidence that science requires. It thrives, as you can see in the picture there, it thrives in environments where genuine scientific expertise is scarce, where the boundary between qualified and unqualified practitioners is blurred, like the middle picture in the middle can show you, and where the audience lacks the technical knowledge to evaluate the claims being made. These are three conditions that describe the current agricultural advisory environment in South Africa with disturbing precision in certain sectors, and I have to tell you, not in all sectors. Locally and internationally, pseudoscience is not a new phenomenon in agriculture. History is filled with examples of agricultural practices that were presented as scientifically validated, but were not. A few examples: the promotion of specific soil-mineral ratios with adequate evidential support, the marketing of water-soluble lime, other yield enhancers with mechanistic claims unsupported by peer-reviewed research, or even worse, publications in predatory journals. For us in the academic world, I can tell you that predatory journals are a very, very real problem and a big concern. And then, something that many of you may have encountered, the recommendation of crop protection products at rates inconsistent with resistant management principles. Like I said, pseudoscience is nothing new. What is new, however, is the speed and scale at which pseudoscientific claims can now propagate. I am sure that most of you have encountered some of these ways in which information is being distributed, not only in agriculture, but most industries. However, there is one that is unique to our industry, and it is called, you can read the rest there, but I would like to stop a minute or two at number 4. And that one is called trending terms as Trojan horses. This, for me, personally, is a big problem. And they are some terms misused by advocates of pseudoscience, such as the terms such as regenerative farming, soil health, biostimulants, biofertification. And they are all valid scientific principles, but they are also terms increasingly misused to promote products with little or no scientific basis to farmers who trust the language It is also, once again, an international problem, and there is much research about it. I personally found it particularly unfair and a big problem because there are exciting new developments in these fields. However, I am delighted to hear that those sectors of industry are very aware of this misuse of their terms, their scientific terms, and actively trying to do something about it. I want to show to you 4 claims, just a few examples that I have encountered over not many years, over the last couple of years, and that should set off alarm bells. I don't know, you may have heard about the passing of water through magnets and what it does to the water. It is a particularly well-known concept in the homeopathic medicine world. Then the products that go through a vibrational or energetic imprint and so on. One of my pet problems was a person from a company who told me that a certain application of a spray could double your yield per hectare. And my question to him was, the world record dry land yield is about 30-something tons. If that spray could double it to 60, and his answer was yes. And then we all know about the single wonder spray that can cure and prevent anything, like all diseases, all deficiencies. It fixes the pH, it keeps away fungus and diseases and all that stuff. But these ridiculous claims are not the problem. Our problem lies with the half-truth. And there's a saying that says the half-truth is worse than a lie. And that is when the lie, the half-truth, borders on the possible and the truth. And it is very difficult for the uninformed person to determine the borders there. And it needs an expert to say, yes, that part is true, but the rest is not true. So for us, the half-truths in pseudoscience and misinformation is a much bigger problem than the ridiculous claims. Pseudoscience is also not unique to agriculture. In the pharmaceutical industry, the opioid crisis in the US was fueled in part by the presentation of selectively chosen clinical data. And there the emphasis is on selectively chosen clinical data was presented as scientific evidence, leading to millions and millions of prescriptions of highly addictive medications being issued by physicians. And listen to this part, by physicians who trusted the advisory infrastructure they were operating within and have been for many years. In aviation, regulatory failures in the certification process for the Boeing 737 MAX were linked directly to the erosion of independent technical oversight in the manufacturing and determining of safety for this project, with catastrophic consequences. Most of you may know about that. In every case, the common thread is the same: the removal of qualified, independent, credentialed oversight from a technically complex advisory process and its replacement by individuals whose primary mandate is commercial rather than scientific is disastrous. Let's look at another way through which pseudoscience can infiltrate our lives. The digital revolution has fundamentally changed the information environment within which agricultural advisors and farmers operate. Internet connectivity, social media, smartphone applications, and cloud-based data services made vast quantities of agricultural information available to anyone with a mobile phone. This is in principle a fantastic and positive development. In practice, however, it has created a new and serious problem named information overload, something that I have researched extensively. Existing technology can detect variation in a field, but it cannot explain why that variation exists. The interpretation of agricultural data, whether from a soil sensor, a satellite image, a yield monitor, or an analysis report, requires the trained and experienced human judgment. The risk of the information overload is not that the farmers have too little data, it is that they have far more data than they can meaningfully interpret without expert assistance. And in the absence, here's the problem. In the absence of qualified agricultural guidance, they will make decisions, the farmers will make decisions based on whichever data source appears most credible, regardless of its actual scientific validity. That is a problem. Let's rewind 6 years. Last thing I want to say about how it infiltrates. The COVID-19 pandemic provided the best possible illustration of what happens when information overload meets a scientific advisory vacuum. Within weeks of the pandemic being declared, social media platforms were saturated with advice on prevention, treatment, and vaccine safety. Much of it contradictory, much of it false, and some of it actually dangerous. Nowadays, easy and accessible AI compounds this problem even more. I attended a brilliant lecture on AI the other day where I learned, and I didn't know this, where I learned that on average 47% of what AI replies with on your prompt is factually incorrect. 47%. How many people know that? How many people who use AI on a daily basis are aware of this? AI is a wonderful tool, but it desperately needs the eye of critical judgment of an expert. You can see on that slide, it says AI is a finishing tool, it's not a thinking tool. Do you know where I got that? I asked Claude, give me a punchline of how I can stress the importance of using AI in the correct way. And that's what AI gave me. It said to me, AI is a finishing tool, not a thinking tool. My research has also found that in agriculture, the WhatsApp group has become the primary information channel for many commercial farmers, that replacing the qualified advisor's visit to the field with a simple photograph and a question, and replacing the peer-reviewed literature with anecdotes and recommendations of product representatives or ChatGPT and other sources of AI. This is a problem, because when a farmer applies a chemical, a fertilizer, or a soil amendment based on advice received in a WhatsApp group, and that advice is incorrect, the consequences do not stay in that WhatsApp group. They enter the soil, the water table, and the entire food chain. So let's look at the devastating effects of pseudoscientific advice on agriculture specifically. The consequences of unqualified agricultural advice manifest across multiple dimensions of sustainability in terms of soil resources, recommendations made without adequate understanding of soil science. And I see that every day. I work with soil science every day. It is my first love, is soil science. Recommendations without adequate understanding can contribute to acidification, structural degradation, compaction, salinization, and the loss of soil organic matter. Facts proven by many studies over many years, and some of you who are also involved in soil science will know that in many cases, these damages could be irreversible. Every unqualified chemical recommendation, every over or under application of a chemical, and every cultivation decision made without understanding the implications for soil structure accelerates these processes. In terms of water resources, over-fertilizer, particularly with nitrogen, is a major source of groundwater pollution. In fact, it is the biggest source of groundwater pollution in the world. In the Eastern Highveld context, with its inherently acidic soils and above average annual rainfall, the risks associated with irresponsible nitrogen management are particularly acute. In terms of chemical crop reduction, we all know that residues from herbicide and pesticide applications can persist in the soil for multiple seasons, meaning that an unqualified recommendation made today may have consequences that manifest 2 or 3 years from now or even later. Farmers operating, and this is an interesting fact from a study, farmers operating without qualified agronomic guidance are significantly less likely to perceive the direct risks associated with herbicide and pesticide use. Furthermore, a study identified two primary reasons why farmers in the UK employed qualified advisors, most of them independent advisors. It's because of their knowledge of new and changing chemistry and their knowledge of the local disease dynamics, both of which are precisely the kind of knowledge that cannot be reliably substituted by a salesperson. So the question is, can pseudoscience be eliminated? Possibly not, but it can be limited. My research into the sugarcane industry proved that. Credentialing is very important, but is only a part of the solution. And I can tell you that the difference between the crop production sector, as you can see on the slide, and the sugarcane sector was that only half, 50% of the people interviewed were slightly concerned about pseudoscience. But more about the findings of that study later. Very, very interesting. And that study can tell us a lot more about the different reasons why pseudoscience is a much bigger problem in certain sectors of our country in agriculture than it is in others. It's a very, very significant findings. The emergence of the private advisor. So what the other solution to fill the advisory vacuum would be the private advisor. It is relatively recent in South Africa compared to countries such as Australia, the UK, and the United States, where independent crop consultants have been an established feature of the agricultural advisory landscape for several decades. In the UK, one can find a well-established private agronomy sector in which independent crop consultants hold formal qualifications and operate under professional codes of conduct, charging farmers directly for their services rather than recovering their costs through product sales. Very important here. A study noted that this model created fundamentally different advisory relationship. The independent advisor's financial interest is aligned with the farmer's long-term productivity rather than with the volume of product moved in a given season. And this is where the concept of the trusted advisor originated, a concept that I have also researched extensively. In Australia, and to some extent here in South Africa, many senior advisors who had built their expertise in the employment of supply companies and public agencies eventually established themselves as independent private practitioners. Unfortunately, not without challenges. This pattern reflects a development of the advisory market, one in which farmers who have experienced, once they have experienced, the difference between qualified independent advice and product-linked advisory services are actually willing to pay a separate fee for the former. My research found that this trend is beginning in the Eastern Highveld, though it is not yet complete because, as you can see there, only 48% of respondents indicated a willingness to pay for independent qualified advice, while 52% still preferred the supply company model. Also meaningful, even more meaningful, when you consider the number of supply companies without employed qualified advice, and there are many of them. The private advisor in South Africa faces a specific set of challenges that do not apply in the same degree in more mature markets overseas. Here, the private agronomist must compete in a market where, and listen to this is the problem, where product-linked advisory services are effectively free to the farmer when the cost of the advisor's time is bundled into the price of the product. But that compromises objectivity. Persuading the South African farmer to pay a separate fee for independent advice requires time and effort. I have also researched this concept in depth, but we will discuss it another time. In Europe and USA, regulatory frameworks are more supportive of the private advisory concept because the private advisory concept is definitely a powerful way to fight pseudoscience and to fill the advisory vacuum. Most of you are aware that SACNASP registration is compulsory for agricultural scientists, and unlike the crop protection advisory sector, which is regulated through CropLife SA and AFCASA, the soil management and plant nutrition advisory sectors have no equivalent mandatory accreditation requirement. Fertasa does, however, encourages its members to utilize SACNASP accredited advisors, and they also promote the FACTS certification scheme, which is quite a good training scheme of basic soil science and plant nutrient science. They do promote the writing of the FACTS exam, but the compliance is voluntary. It is not compulsory. I am a member of both the Soil Science Society of South Africa and the South African Society of Crop Production. And let me tell you, they are both wonderful societies. They do great work. We have fantastic interactions, and I have learned a lot from them. But once again, membership is voluntary. The practical implications of these voluntary societies are the following. And that means that an unqualified individual can advise a farmer on soil analysis, interpretation, and fertilizer recommendation. And here is the important part. These are two of the most technically complex and consequential decisions in crop production. And they can do that without any formal qualification or accreditation. And believe me, I witness this on a daily basis. I am also a volunteer registered member of the South African Society of Agricultural Extensionists. Interestingly, membership for government extension of offices with this body is compulsory. It is a highly active society that fosters effective communication between researchers, advisors, and farmers, primarily within the small-scale farming community. They offer workshop, webinars, and training on a regular basis, similar to what we are doing here today, led by highly effective and competent professionals. And I can see an exponential improvement in the scientific integrity of the advice offered to the small-scale farmers lately. And I also believe many of us could learn from them, from SASAI's approach to raising awareness and facilitating communication between scientists and farmers. Now we get to a quite important part, results of my first research. Can I give you a quick background? But let's have a first quick recap. We have discussed how it was, what was lost and how it happened, and we have also discussed what fills the advisory vacuum when it happens. Because I was concerned about the integrity of advisory services, I decided to research the farmers' perceptions and their preferences regarding this issue, specifically in the areas of soil management, plant nutrition, and crop protection. There were many relevant findings, but we don't have time for all of it today, so I'm only going to discuss a few with you. On the question of soil management, 100% of the respondents regarded soil management as a crucial part of sustainable crop production, and 100% of them also used soil sampling as a monitoring tool for soil management. Also, 100% acknowledged the importance of the soil physical properties, chemical properties, and so on. Yet, when asked who interpret their soil analysis that all of them use, only 78% used a qualified agronomist, meaning that 20%, 22% were relying on either a laboratory analyst, a fertilizer company representative, or other unknown sources. For subsequent fertilizer recommendations, 81% used a qualified agronomist. Once again, 90% did not. Why is this significant? Because this is the most sequential advisor interaction of crop production. It means that only 1 in 5 operating in an important grain producing region received questionable advice. On the question of accreditation, 81% believed the advisor to be accredited, but 19% simply did not know, as you can see on the graph there. In the crop protection sector, 76% confirmed accreditation, but a concerning 21% were unaware of the advisor's accreditation status. I can't help to wonder what the reaction would be if we were discussing the medical or aviation industry, and I were here today to tell you that my research showed that 1 in 5 people who get medical treatment from a person who claims to be a medical doctor but is not, or that 19% of airline pilots may not be qualified. My research also found that 93% of respondents would not be content with advice given without the input of a qualified advisor. However, and I mentioned this is a controversial finding, as the same respondents who just said this 90% figure also admitted they have never questioned their advisors over all disciplines, qualifications, or accreditations. In my personal case, in all the years I've been working as an agronomist in many parts of our country, only once have I been asked by a farmer, who are you and what are your credentials? Only once. So let's see what the farmers say about field visit and crop scouting. 30% of farmers reported that their advisors in soil and plant did not inspect their fields on a regular basis, and they were not happy with that. On a positive note, most farmers, and there you can see 97% of farmers were very content with the way in which their crop advisors monitored their fields during the growth season, scouting for pests and diseases. And to all of you that do that, well done. Towards the conclusion of the lecture, and in terms of the relative importance of the 3 disciplines, the research further showed that farmers ranked plant nutrition as most important for sustainable crop production, followed by soil management, 45%, and crop protection, only 39%. Now, you need to take note of that 39% of crop protection, because I am going to explain this figure later on. However, when asked about the advisor's knowledge they most valued, the ranking shifted. First, it was soil management, followed by plant nutrition, and again, in the 3rd place, It was crop protection knowledge. Once again, you need to take, I have circled it in red because this is a revealing distinction that we will discuss shortly. Farmers know that soil management is the foundation and they want their advisor to know that it too. That's awesome. But why is the crop advisor's knowledge of crop protection in both cases such a low priority with a farmer? And you'll see the answer now. The contribution of qualified agronomic advice to crop production improvement on the Highveld was striking. When asked about the contribution of soil management, it was 68%. Said that it attributed to 50% or more. For plant nutrition, 74% said it was 50% or more. But for crop protection, only 61% attributed more than 50% improvement in their farming operations to a qualified advisor's input in the crop protection industry. Again, circled in red. Again, why the lowest? So in our quest to find answers, let's see what the Highveld farmers tell us about the crop industry. Two other crucial findings in the crop protection industry was that 87% preferred to purchase products from suppliers that offer qualified advice with the product, which makes sense. Although one can say it compromises objectivity, it makes sense. And that only 58% of farmers regard product price of lesser importance than qualified advice. Do you understand the implication of this finding? In other words, 42% of farmers would rather save money on their chemical products and potentially risk effectivity with all the associated effects on the environment for saving money. That is unsettling. Let's go back to the question of why. The first one was 39% in both cases. The second one was only 60. Sorry, I just want to get. The second one was only the 61 part. And we need to find out why farmers consistently regard the input of the crop protection advisor as less significant, or so it appears, less significant to the contribution to his sustainability of his operation. So why do farmers seemingly regard the input of the crop advisor towards improvement less important than those advising in soil management and plant nutrition? And why is the priority for crop protection knowledge so low? Only 39% of farmers regard this as important. It was only when I questioned this outcome and started digging a bit deeper that I came across some very, very interesting facts that eventually led to a massive PhD research project where I investigated the breakdown in communication between researchers and farmers, the information overload, pseudoscience, and why some sectors are not even concerned about any of the three factors that I have just mentioned. The answers to our previous questions about the crop protection industry are the following, and I can summarize it as follows. The agricultural industry occupies a unique position in agriculture. It has always been sensitive and at times controversial. Why is this? The direct effects of an incorrect chemical recommendation are immediate and visible. Wrong herbicide applied at the wrong rate destroys the wrong plant, or fails to destroy the right one, or disease. The long-term risks are less visible but potentially more serious. Residues in the soil, contamination of groundwater, effects on non-target life forms, and documented concerns about chronic exposure risks for animals, humans, and the broader ecosystems. These realities have ensured that the agricultural advisor sector has been formally regulated for far longer than many of the other agricultural advisory disciplines, especially for the other two that we have discussed today. In South Africa, this regulation is giving practical expression through CropLife SA and FCAS. And as you know, any individual involved in the marketing, distribution, and recommendation of these products, agrochemical products, is legally required to be registered and to pass the prescribed examination. And herein lies the difference. It is not a voluntary framework. It is a mandatory professional requirement, and it has been enforced consistently for decades. When the withdrawal of government extension created an advisory vacuum in the commercial farming sector after 1994, the crop protection advisor situation did not really change that much. The regulatory framework remained intact. Qualified accredited advisors continue to operate under a professional code of conduct. They continue to base their recommendations on registered products, labels, and approved application protocols. And they also continue to update their knowledge through structured professional development, exactly what we are doing here today. While pseudoscience flooded the soil management and plant nutrition bases, to my big concern, carried by social media, unqualified representative, and controlled field trial results, the crop protection advisory sector maintained a level of scientific consistency and integrity that the unregulated disciplines could not match. So back to the research findings from the Eastern Highveld confirmed this, but they require careful interpretation. Farmers in the study ranked crop protection as the least important of the three advisory disciplines and rated their confidence in their crop protection advisor knowledge slightly lower than in the other disciplines. At first glance, this appears to diminish the role of the crop protection advisor, but in fact, it reflects the opposite. It is an inverse finding and an acknowledgement of competency and competence. Why is that? In the fields, and here's the explanation of that. In the fields where pseudoscience is most active, soil management and plant nutrition, farmers feel the absence of reliable, consistent advice acutely. They rank their advisors' input as critically important precisely because the information landscape is confusing, contradictory, and often scientifically unsound. They need expert guidance to navigate it. In crop protection, however, where the regulatory framework has ensured decades of consistent, accredited, science-based advice, farmers are far more confident. They are not less reliant on their crop protection advisor. No, they are just more secure in the relationship. The urgency is lower because the confusion is lower. The communication between researcher and farmer in the crop protection field is cleaner, more consistent, and less disrupted by misinformation because the credentialing infrastructure has always been there to protect it. It is simple. What does the trusted advisor look like? There are many other attributes to the trusted advisor, but this is basically where the start is, like a starter pack. It is simple, experienced, qualified, accredited, ethical, and advocate of true science. And most importantly, the passion for science must be greater than the passion for wealth. It is as simple as that. In conclusion to today, to the ethical crop protection advisor in this audience, the message is this. What you have been doing all along by submitting to accreditation, maintaining your registration, Grounding your recommendations in science has proven to be the correct approach. My research has confirmed this on many levels. The knowledge and integrity of the people who advise on its management, our Earth's management, may be the most important factor determining whether the same Earth, our only Earth, remains productive for the next generation of farmers. To most of your crop advisors, to CropLife SA, good work. You're doing exceptionally well. Your sector is not the problem. It is in fact a proof of concept. The question now is whether the rest of the agricultural advisory profession is willing to learn from your example. You all know the story of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. It now has been joined by a 5th partner called misinformation. So from my side, I thank you very much for your time and for listening to me. And I hope that you found the lecture insightful and informative.
Wow, Dr. Brewer, sincerely thank you for a fantastic presentation. As a scholar of science communication myself, I can honestly say this was an incredibly important topic to cover by a very knowledgeable presenter. So thank you so much for all your time and effort that went into addressing our members today. I know every CPD participant will benefit greatly from this module. So again, thank you so much. I see a hand, and let me see if I can unmute the participant. I will allow the mic quickly if you would like to ask a question.
Good afternoon, everyone.
There we go.
Yes.
Great.
Dr. Brewer, I will try to be very, very brief. 3 things. One, what you just presented today is one of the reasons why it's difficult to scale up agriculture in South Africa and Africa. Because, you know, if you don't fix the technical advice, the people interested in agriculture that are losing money, that are trying to go from small to commercial, this is one of the excuses why, or the reasons why. The second thing is, yes, I agree with you, is this problem is worldwide. I'm from Colombia originally, and then I remember 2 things that happened there. One, they removed from the labels that an agronomist had to be consulted or had to prescribe the products to the farmers. And that was removed from the labels, and that created a lot of confusions. And nowadays you find people that study in agricultural colleges selling products out there and giving advices to the farmers. That's a big problem. And the other one was the banks. The banks, to give loans to farmers, and no longer require the signature of a proper advisor for that farmer to get the loan and to get a proper advice throughout the extension of the loan or the crop or the business. And the third one that I wanted to encourage you with this, because it's encouraging that you have done with your students as well, and you continue doing it, is that maybe you should have a talk with SACNASP in terms about the professionals and the proper advisors, that this needs to be enforced even more. And the other one is that please continue and take it up. Don't never give up. This is very important what you have presented to us today. I thank you, and I thank you all. Bye-bye.
Can I respond to that quickly, Ariza?
Please, yes.
Thank you very much for important points that you mentioned there, and for the confirmation that it is indeed an international problem. Yes, I think that about the banks. Let me start at the bottom. The banks who does not require a qualified, let's call it rather an agricultural specialist to do the evaluation or the potential, determining of the potential of a farm is a big problem for me. Also, they don't require an agriculturist to evaluate the agronomical practices on a farm, which for me is an even bigger problem. About the recommendations by agronomists, it is exactly what the free market dictates from us. And unfortunately, that is one of the effects of the free market. But I think, because I'm sure I will get the question now, I think the way to move forward is just like you said, we need to keep on talking about this problem. It is a problem across most industries in the world, and certainly more with agriculture, because the direct effects on poor recommendations, like I said earlier, are not that immediately visible. Thank you for reminding me to talk to SACNASP, and I am willing to talk to anybody who has an interest and who can help us to create an awareness. I think that one should actually start by creating an awareness with the farmers, so that the farmers can start asking the advisors, tell me what your credentials are. What are your qualifications? Are you actually an expert in the field that you are advising on, like you claim to be? And show me some research, proper research results, if you have. So for me, creating an awareness would be the first step to start with the farmers specifically, so that they start asking the right questions.
Excellent, thank you. McGregor, I'm going to unmute you. Then please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Ariza. Thank you to Peter for a very interesting talk, I must say. I've got a very quick question here. My question is almost, on the flip side of your study, especially in the Eastern, I think it was the Eastern Highveld, if I'm not mistaken. So my question is, what is the tendency or rather occurrence of having a qualified sales rep or technical advisory who does have, the formal qualifications and accreditation, but still somehow gives misleading info or maybe half-truth information, which, doesn't necessarily happen out of ill intent or intentionally. It happens unintentionally. So the question is, to what extent do you find such occurrences, if any? And if they do, what would you allude that to?
All right, that is actually a simple question to answer. Thank you for that. In the subsequent follow-up study that I did about what happened to the communication between the researcher and the farmer, that question was intensely researched. But because we do have qualified sales people with the correct accreditation and qualifications, and I can show you from the results of that study that we have a common problem through all of them is actually the compromising of objective advice. Because there is still, as long as there is a motive of some kind of a commercial incentive, then you must know that humans will probably swing it towards a commercial advantage to themselves to a lesser or a more extent. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Although I would have, liked it even more if it was maybe to give, let's say, put it in statistical terms as to maybe it happens, I don't know, 12% of the time, or maybe the occurrence is less than 50%, that type of a thing. But it does answer the question nonetheless.
Okay, sorry about that. I don't have that figures out of from the top of my head, but I have done the research, and maybe in future, if I have the opportunity, we can discuss the second part of the study, which will then reveal some very interesting findings.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. It doesn't look like we have any further questions or any hands up. Again, Dr. Brewer, this was fantastic. Thank you for great discussions and a great presentation. And with that, I hope everyone enjoys their Friday and their weekend. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Ariza. Goodbye, everybody.